All right, folks, buckle up because today we're diving headfirst into some pretty intense stuff. The Doomsday Clock. That countdown that atomic scientists created to show us just how close we are to basically, well, wiping ourselves out.
Yeah, it is kind of wild how a simple clock face can capture such a complex, weighty idea, the potential for humanity to, really be its own worst enemy.
Exactly. And this year, 2025, that clock ticked even closer to midnight than it ever has before, just 89 seconds away. We've got some really insightful articles to unpack here from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, NPR, and even some fascinating stuff from the University of Chicago archives.
And what I think is so striking is that the Doomsday Clock, it's not just about the threat of nuclear war anymore.
It really is like a whole checklist now
Yeah.
of existential threats, like climate change,
Yeah.
disruptive technologies like AI, even the spread of misinformation.
The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists actually uses the phrase unprecedented risk. And they say that continuing on this current path is a form of madness.
Madness, that's a pretty strong word,
Yeah.
especially coming from scientists. They actually point to some pretty scary scenarios in their report.
Yeah, like the escalating conflict in Ukraine, the growth of nuclear arsenals worldwide, and just the alarming rate at which, global temperatures are rising.
Oh, and don't forget about the spread of HPAI,
Yeah.
bird flu.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen firsthand how quickly pandemics can disrupt the world.
Right. And the bulletin, they even highlight the potential for AI to be misused in warfare. I mean, imagine autonomous weapon systems, making life or death decisions without any human intervention. It's a pretty chilling thought.
Okay, so we've got all these, kind of external threats out there. But what I find really interesting is this idea that the doomsday clock is ultimately like a reflection of us.
Yeah.
It's
And
not just
it's
something out there.
Yeah.
It's really intertwined with our own actions and our choices.
Like we've met the enemy and it is us, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The scientists who first created the clock back in 1947, they were already grappling with this dilemma.
Yeah.
The University of Chicago archives show that it was this real turning point where, for the first time, scientists were forced to confront the ethical implications of their own inventions.
Like they were saying, hey, just because we can build something, it doesn't necessarily mean we should.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. They understood that human ingenuity could be both a blessing and a curse. And the Doomsday Clock became a way to remind us of that duality.
So it's not just about bombs anymore. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences and that we have a responsibility to, use our knowledge and technology wisely.
Absolutely. And that responsibility extends to how we consume and share information, too.
Which brings us to the whole issue of misinformation, right?
Yeah.
The bulletin actually calls it a potent threat multiplier.
And for good reason. I mean, when we can't even agree on basic facts, it becomes almost impossible to address these complex existential threats effectively.
And that's where, AI gets really tricky. Think about the potential for, AI-generated deepfakes to spread so rapidly online that it makes it nearly impossible to distinguish truth from falsehood.
Yeah, it's like, as NPR puts it, a virus. Infecting the information ecosystem, eroding trust, and undermining the very foundations of democracy.
So it's like this double whammy.
Yeah.
We've got the threats themselves, and then on top of that, we have our own inability to even have a rational conversation about them. It's almost as if we're fighting each other instead of fighting the real problems.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But it's important to remember that, the Doomsday Clock isn't meant to paralyze us with fear. It's meant to be a wake-up call.
Right, like a doctor giving you a serious diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it's also a chance to change course.
Exactly. The bulletin is very clear on that point. They say it's not too late.
There's still time
Yeah.
to turn things around. Experts like Robert Rosner and Daniel Holtz, they're adamant that we can still avoid the worst outcomes, but we have to act decisively and we have to act now.
And they stress the urgent need for dialogue and cooperation, especially among the most powerful nations, the U.S., China, and Russia. The bulletin calls it a prime responsibility to pull the world back from the brink.
Which brings us right back to that central question.
Yeah.
Does the Doomsday Clock represent a threat from outside humanity, or is the real threat humanity itself?
Yeah, it's a question that really echoes throughout all the sources we've been diving into, is like this recurring theme, this the unintended consequences of human ingenuity. And, Those scientists back in 1947, they were just acutely aware of the potential for humanity to actually self-destruct.
Right, like they opened up Pandora's box with the atomic bomb and were like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe we need like a warning label on this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And fast forward to today, the threats have multiplied, but that underlying tension, it's still there. The Doomsday Clock is just this constant reminder that we're not just, passive observers in this story. We're the ones writing it.
And judging by how close that clock is to midnight, maybe we need like a better editor or something. But seriously, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. Like, what can one person actually do to make a difference when you're facing these massive global challenges?
Yeah, that's a common feeling. And it's where the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, they offer some really interesting perspectives. They argue that change actually starts with individual choices. It's about understanding that each action that we take, no matter how small it may seem, it contributes to that larger picture.
Okay, so let's get practical here. What are some concrete steps that you can take to shift that doomsday clock away from, the dreaded midnight hour?
Well, I mean, knowledge is power, right? The Bulletin, they stress the importance of being informed about these complex issues. I mean, and that means going beyond, just the headlines and the sound bites. It means, diving into the research, understanding the nuances, really grappling with, the different perspectives that are out there.
So step one is education. But where do you even begin? I mean, there is just so much information out there. It's hard to know what's reliable, what's not, what to trust.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It can be super overwhelming, and that's why resources like the Bulletin are so valuable because they provide that in-depth analysis. They have insights from leading experts in all of these fields. They even, they publish a magazine that explores all of these issues in a really accessible way.
Their website is a goldmine too. I mean, they have articles, they have videos, even podcasts on there. It's like a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to kind of get up to speed on the state of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not enough to just consume the information, right? We need to actually engage with it, talk about it, challenge our own assumptions and our biases.
So step two is conversation. But these can be such touchy subjects. It's really easy to end up in these shouting matches with people who just disagree with you.
And that's exactly why the Bulletin talks about, fact-based public discussions. It's about being respectful, even when you disagree, and being willing to actually listen to those different points of view.
It's about recognizing that we're all kind of in this together, even if we don't always see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the next step, right? Holding our leaders accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't just sit back and expect, someone else to fix these problems for us. The Bulletin is very clear about, the role of these powerful nations, U.S., China, Russia. They have this responsibility to, to work together, to find common ground, and to actually take concrete action.
So we're talking about like voting for candidates who actually prioritize these issues,
Yeah.
contacting our representatives, advocating for policies that actually address these threats.
All of that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond, just the political realm, too. We can support organizations that are working on the ground. We can make, conscious consumer choices. We can invest in sustainable solutions.
It's about understanding that the power to change the world isn't just in the hands of, the politicians and the CEOs. It's in our hands too.
Every choice that we make, every dollar that we spend, every conversation we have, it all adds up.
But here's something I've been kind of wrestling with. We've been talking a lot about the dangers of technology. But isn't technology also part of the solution?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that, the sources we've been looking at are grappling with as well. The Doomsday Clock, it lists disruptive technologies as this threat, but it's clear that technology itself isn't, inherently good or bad.
Right. It's like that old saying, guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's all about how we use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Take something like AI, for example. I mean, it has the potential to revolutionize healthcare, combat climate change, connect people across the globe. But it can also be used for, surveillance, for autonomous weapon systems, for spreading misinformation.
So the doomsday clock isn't saying that we need to, like, abandon technology altogether. It's more about using it responsibly, ethically, and with a clear understanding of its potential consequences.
And that means having, some difficult conversations. We need scientists, engineers, ethicists, policymakers, everyday people all working together to really shape the future of technology.
It's about ensuring that human values, they guide technological development, not the other way around. But, even with all the best intentions, sometimes it just feels like technology it's advancing faster than our ability to actually understand its implications.
And that's a valid concern,
Yeah.
We need to be asking those tough questions about, the potential downsides of new technologies, not just celebrating all the, shiny new features.
We need to be thinking about the long-term consequences, not just those immediate benefits. And maybe, just maybe, if we can get that balance right, then we can actually start to turn back that clock.
Well, I mean, that's the hope, isn't it? That we can harness the power of human ingenuity to actually solve the very problems that we've created.
It's a daunting challenge for
Yeah.
sure, but it's one that we just can't afford to ignore. So
Mhm.
so what does all of this mean for you, the listener? How can you take all of this information and actually make a difference in the world?
And that is what we're going to be exploring in the final part of our deep dive here. We're going to look at the concrete actions that you can take to move the world away from the brink and towards a more just and sustainable future.
Because in the end, the doomsday clock, it isn't just about the end of the world. It's about the choices that we make,
Yeah.
the actions that we take, and the future that we create.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into the Doomsday Clock.
We've been
Yeah.
exploring some pretty heavy stuff so far. The whole idea that humanity might be its own worst enemy.
Yeah, it's been a lot to unpack. We've talked about the whole complex web of dangers facing the world, from nuclear war and climate change to these disruptive technologies and just this erosion of truth.
It is a lot to process, but what I find really interesting is this idea the doomsday clock isn't, just a warning. It's almost like a challenge.
Yeah.
It's like this giant cosmic mirror reflecting
Mhm.
reflecting our choices back at us.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we're not just passengers on this spaceship Earth. We're the ones,
Yeah.
at the controls.
And the question is, what do we see in that reflection? Are we going to keep, heading down this same path, or are we ready to change course?
Right. Are we going to hit the brakes, or are we going to just keep speeding towards that cliff?
So let's talk about solutions. What does a a more just and sustainable future actually look like? What can we do to make sure that clock starts ticking backwards?
Well, one of the most striking things that the bulletin highlights is just how interconnected all these global threats actually are.
Yeah.
You can't really solve one without addressing the others.
Right. It's like this whole tangled mess of problems, climate change, poverty, inequality, resource scarcity, political instability. I mean, they all kind of feed into each other.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
it's this vicious cycle, and that's why we need this more holistic approach. This real shift in thinking from short-term gains to a long-term well-being for everyone on the planet.
Okay, but where do we even begin with that? What are some concrete actions that we can take to untangle this mess?
Well, the bulletin is very clear about the need for a global energy transition. The shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewable sources of energy.
Now, we are seeing some progress on that front, right?
Yeah.
With the growth of solar and wind power and things like that. But the bulletin is arguing that it needs to happen much faster.
Yeah, much, much faster. They're calling for greater investment in research and development, as well as policies that actually incentivize the adoption of these clean energy technologies.
And it's not just about, new technologies. It's also about changing our habits,
Yeah, absolutely.
reducing our energy consumption, wasting less, being more mindful of the resources that we're using.
Right. It's about recognizing that even small individual actions, they can have this ripple effect.
Speaking of individual actions, let's circle back to misinformation for a second. We talked about how the spread of false information is really making it harder to solve these complex global problems.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Right.
If we can't even agree on basic facts, how can we possibly work together to create a better future?
So what can we do to combat this infodemic? I mean, we're bombarded with information from all sides these days. How do we even know what to believe?
Well, the bulletin emphasizes the importance of critical thinking. We need to be more and more discerning about the information that we consume. Check sources, verify facts, be wary of sensationalized headlines and emotional manipulation.
It's so easy to get, sucked into the outrage machine, to just share something without really, thinking about it critically.
Right. And the bulletin also, encourages us to engage in respectful dialogue, even with people who hold different views. It's about understanding where they're coming from, finding that common ground and really building bridges instead of walls.
And on a larger scale, they also stress that the need for stronger democratic institutions and processes.
Yeah, they argue that a healthy democracy is really essential for addressing these complex global challenges. It provides this framework for dialogue, for debate, and for evidence-based decision making.
But let's be honest, democracy is under pressure in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
Including right here in the U.S. We're seeing rising political polarization, threats to voting rights, attacks on a free and independent press.
Right. It's a worrying trend for sure. And the bulletin, they call for this renewed commitment to democratic values, a rejection of extremism and authoritarianism and a real defense of the institutions that safeguard our freedoms.
Because ultimately, our individual rights and liberties are intertwined with the fate of the planet. I mean, we can't create a sustainable future in a world where democracy is crumbling.
It just won't work. The Doomsday Clock, it's a stark reminder that we are all interconnected. Our choices have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the entire planet and for future generations.
It's a call to rise above our differences, to set aside our short-term self-interest and to embrace this vision of a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And while the Doomsday Clock may paint this, pretty bleak picture, it's important to remember that it's not a prophecy, it's a challenge, it's a call to action.
And it's a reminder that we have the power to shape our own destiny. It's time to stop seeing the doomsday clock as this countdown to destruction and start seeing it as a call to create a better future.
A future where we use our knowledge, our technology, our collective wisdom to actually solve the problems that we've created and to build a world that is, just equitable and sustainable for all.
So that's our deep dive on the Doomsday Clock. We hope you found it, insightful, maybe even a little bit inspiring. Remember, the future is not predetermined. It's in our hands. So go out there, be informed, engage in thoughtful conversations, demand action from your leaders, make conscious choices, and most importantly, never give up hope.
Yeah, because the power to change the world, it lies within each and every one of us.